I would love to give you an example or share with you an example of a man that came into my office many years ago, and he was almost in tears. And he sat at my desk, his shoulders were down, and his mouth was down. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "My life is over." He said, "Everything that I've done to date in terms of a career is finished." He said, "I'm 40. He said, "I'm on the breadline. Nobody wants to employ me." He said, "It's over." And I said, "Why have you come to see me?" He said, "Well, I worked for the Air Force, and that was 3 months ago I left and took early retirement at the age of 40. He said, "Since then, I can't get work." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, at the Air Force, I was fixing helicopters, and nobody other than the Air Force has those helicopters. So nobody wants me." And I said, "What sort of work would you like to do if you could get it?" He said, "Well, mechanical work, of course, but it's not available." So I gave him an exercise, and I'll give it to you as well. I asked him to go and buy one of those school notebooks with lines on. I said, "Over the next 2 weeks, write down one item per line, and the items I want you to write are, first of all, your experiences in life, every experience. Then in the middle, start to write down what your skills are, every skill that you can imagine. And thirdly, write down your qualities. And if you're not sure of your qualities, ask your wife or ask your children or ask your mother-in-law. But come back with the book when it's filled." 2 weeks later, he was back. I said, "Tick off the items that give you the greatest sense of joy and fulfillment. Now that's your key radar. Whatever turns you on, gives you the greatest sense of being fully alive. That's the direction to head in. And it's an infallible test to know if you're heading in the right direction." Now, he had ticked down rugby, swimming, athletics, and tennis. And he said, "Look," he said, "I love these things." He said, "That's what I did as my hobby in the Air Force. I was the captain of all the sports teams, the coach of all the sports teams." He said, "I took them overseas. We won all sorts of competitions." But he said, "I'm too old. I'm 40. Nobody will pay me for doing that." I said, "What if they would pay you? Would you accept a position involved with sport?" Of course. He said, "Yes, I would." Now, what happens when you start to focus on something? It doesn't matter what it is. Once you start to focus on it and your mind and your emotions are connected to it, then you start to see those sorts of things in your life. A few days later, he was back with the newspaper. It was the Herald newspaper from Auckland, New Zealand, and there was a big advertisement there for a recreational officer. That's a sports officer for a city. Someone aged 30, with a university education, and with 5 years' experience as a recreational officer. Charles looked at me and he said, "Look," he said, "I'm 40, never been to university, and I've never been a recreational officer." And I said, "But that's not the point." I said, "If you were offered the job, would you accept?" And he said, "Yes." I shook his hand and I said, "The job is yours." He said, "But I haven't had the interview." I said, "That'll come next. The job will be confirmed or not confirmed by the person who's going to interview you. You are the first person who decides whether that job is yours. All they do is confirm or not confirm your decision. So we've made the decision that job is yours until you have the interview. And then they're going to confirm it one way or the other. So you start work on Monday, and the interview turned out to be about 10 days later. One thing led to the other. That man is the recreational officer for his city, and he turned a run-down, second-rate city where people were leaving, houses were vacant, shops were being closed, and he turned that, with his love of sport, into the country's most booming, vital city in the whole country. One that fully came alive. Now with the biggest sports stadium, all the houses are full, everybody is wanting to come to that city because of sport. One man just doing what he loves to do.